we try not to think about the scariest one of all, the gigantic half-dragon, half-octopus, half-humanoid, great old one himself, Cthulhu, waiting to return from his city beneath the sea, who day and night must slumber in relay, wave his tentacles, having nasty dreams, and who has the might, as master of relay, to drive humanity insane. Cthulhu! Cthulhu! Tentacles! Cthulhu! Cthulhu! Tentacles!
Hello there. As I'm recording this, it is Thursday, and tomorrow, the Watchmen movie, as I'm sure many people realize, will be in theaters all across the United States of America. And, you know, I haven't seen the movie yet, obviously, but I've read the book, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times. And it is in the news, and it has become quite apparent to me that there is something that has changed in the movie having to do with the ending of the book. And I don't know what they changed it to, but it is common knowledge that something has been changed. And some people on the internet and other places are commenting, oh, it's a good change, or, oh, the change, it works just as well, or some other such thing. Well, not knowing what they changed it to, I don't know if it works just as well. But I do have many reasons why I think that it must be what it was. Now, I'm gonna spoil Watchmen here. So if you have never read the book, you should probably stop listening right now, because it is one of the greatest graphic works of all time. And having it ruined for you really, even if you don't think, it's so great, or you don't care a lot about it, that's because you haven't read it yet. All right, so let's just get right down to it. At the end of Watchmen, right, Ozymandias releases his giant squid-like nasty monster. People seem to call it the Squid, right? It's not really a squid, but that's what they call it. Onto New York. Thus, he kills many, many people, but seemingly unites the world against this common threat of alien invasion. And I think that there are at least 2 major reasons that I'm pretty sure were in the minds of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons while they were making Watchmen. But there are many other reasons they were not thinking that also it must have been a squid. It could not have been, a nuke. It could not have been some sort of biological weapon or a terrorist attack or any of these other sorts of things. And I will tell you now the 2 major reasons why it must have been a big, nasty extraterrestrial or seemingly extraterrestrial monster. Reason number 1, the surface level reason here, right? Ozymandias was trying to unite the world against a common foe, right? And thus bring about peace. We had this situation where the people of the United States were united against their common foe of Russia, right? And or the Soviet Union. The Soviets were united in their common enemy of the United States, right? So by creating a third external common foe for all humanity, right, you could unite the world against that common foe. This is a common idea of neoconservative political ideology. When I say neoconservative, I don't mean, the way that word is used today. I mean the way the word neoconservative was originally used to describe people like, Leo Strauss and such. But anyway, if he wants to unite the world, this threat really needs to be external to Earth. You can't unite all of humanity if the threat is man-made. So if it was a nuke, let's say he nuked New York, right? People would think it was the Russians sneaking in with some sort of suitcase nuke or something like that, right? If it was some sort of, terrorist attack, a biological weapon, well, there would be a significant possibility, and the most reasonable explanation, Occam's razor, would be that biological attack was from Earth. If it was, even if he made it look like the nuke came from space, right? It would be very easy to disbelieve it. Oh, it could have been some trick. It could have been some man-made technology. So just in the surface level of Ozymandias achieving his goal of uniting the world against some common foe, the threat needed to be completely and undeniably, without any doubt, extraterrestrial in origin and real. And that, the giant squid from space that releases the psychic attack fills that bill quite nicely. Now, there are perhaps other things that could fit that bill quite nicely. If you think about the movie Independence Day, right? That's exactly what happened in that movie. You had these UFOs came from space, only it actually was an alien invasion. That's a problem, but... And the entire world, they show you at the end of the movie, all Israelis and Palestinians hugging each other and all this stuff, right? It's because, humanity was threatened. They united against this common foe. Okay, the second reason that I think it must have been this big nasty squid is sort of obvious in that this big nasty squid monster really evokes Cthulhu. It's obvious. It evokes Cthulhu, right? The big tentacled monster of H.P. Lovecraft's creation, right? And it is no secret that Alan Moore, at least, is a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, as is myself, as are many other geeks, right, out there in the world. I mean, Alan Moore, he's had there are many mentions of Cthulhu in one of the parts of the recent League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Black Dossier. Alan Moore's Yuggoth Cultures book has many Cthulhu-ish H.P. Lovecraftian mentions and nods in it. He is a big fan of these sorts of things. And The Watchmen is no exception. Now, specifically when you think of H.P. Lovecraft, and big tentacled monsters, I mean, H.P. Lovecraft wrote about a lot of things, Shoggoths and Old Ones and Deep Ones and all sorts of things. But Cthulhu sort of comes to the, it's the one people are most familiar with. And if you haven't read The Call of Cthulhu, right, the short story, The Call of Cthulhu, I highly, highly recommend you read it. It's a short story. It'll take you maybe 10 minutes. You can just find it on the internet, the full text of it, right? I don't know if it's in the public domain, but there are websites that just have the full text. You can just read it. If you really want to pay for it, I'm sure you can easily get it, on, many, many places by legitimate means. Usually they sell Lovecraftian, when you buy a book of Lovecraft stuff, you'll get a whole bunch of stories in there. So if you buy a book, you'll probably get Call of Cthulhu and Thing on the Doorstep and a whole bunch of other stories all in one book. But anyway, if you haven't read The Call of Cthulhu, this is probably a reason why you don't think the squid monster is necessary, right? Let me summarize what the story of Call of Cthulhu is for you. But first, I want to read the very first paragraph of the story, Call of Cthulhu, to you. This is the very first paragraph of the story. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. So, you see here, right, what he's saying in this first paragraph is like, look, it's because humans don't know things that we aren't basically driven to insanity. There are things that man was not meant to know, and one day science will find these things, and thus we will be completely driven insane by them, unable to comprehend them, and it'll be the end of it, all right? And the story, Call of Cthulhu, goes like such. There's a man, he's sort of just, your average guy. It's told in the first person. And pretty much before the story even started, his uncle died. And this was sort of like the weird professor uncle, that didn't have any, children, and he was a widower, right? So this guy is going to sort of take care of this, strange uncle's estate. Pretty typical setup for, sort of a pulpy kind of story. And while he's going through the uncle's things, he finds a box of strange stuff. And he was a professor of, archaeology or something like that. So, having strange stuff. But this one particular box of stuff was very, very interesting. And our main character was very curious about it. And this box contained many strange things and strange writings and whatnot. And most notably, it contained this one bas-relief. And I think that's how it's pronounced, a bas-relief. It's B-A-S relief, right? So it's basically a small, sort of a sculpture-ish object. It's a relief. You can look it up online what a relief is if you don't know. And, the image on this relief was just so striking that he sort of, was compelled, and his curiosity compelled him to find out more. So he began to investigate. Now, you see, and this goes back to what was said in the first paragraph of the story, right? There are things that man was not meant to know. You find out information that you didn't really want to know, but you were so curious, and once you found it, you were driven insane. Well, in the course of his investigation of this box of weird stuff and this relief, he finds out about, crazy cults, and he finds out about, all sorts of nasty monsters, and then he finds, Cthulhu, and he learns, basically too much, and it drives him mad. And, it all relates, his uncle died sort of, following the same pursuit of, tracking down and learning things he was not meant to know. And if you look at how this relates to Watchmen, right, you can see how, Rorschach especially, but also the others, right, were investigating throughout the book. And at the end, they found things that they found Ozymandias' plan, things they were not meant to know, and it drove them, sort of crazy, mad, if you will, in a way. Especially, Rorschach, who found this, and and look at the comedian, right? He's dead at the beginning of the story, but he found out what was going on that island, things that man was not meant to know, and thus was driven completely mad by it. And much is the same. So it is entirely fitting that Cthulhu would be the thing that was at the end, right? It totally makes sense. And Ozymandias, I think he more fits the role of the cultist, worshiping Cthulhu, trying to wake him up from his sleep, and thus, sort of already being mad like a cultist, but not being driven mad by this journey for knowledge. It's like the cultists already know about Cthulhu, right? They're just sort of crazy and are trying to bring him around. And I think that's the role that Ozymandias fills, is the role of the cultist in the story of the Call of Cthulhu. Now, the other things about Cthulhu, right? Think about Cthulhu himself. Cthulhu is basically a big, giant, nasty dragon, squid, humanoid monster from outer space, actually. And he sleeps in a place called Relay. It's basically an undersea, sort of place that is hidden away from humanity. And he's sleeping there. And if he ever wakes up, we're all fucked. But right now he's sleeping, and he's, while he's sleeping, he's having these really nasty dreams. And these nasty dreams that he's having are affecting, the minds of people around the earth. Artists and really creative people are being driven mad because the dreams of Cthulhu are getting into their minds as well, And think about how this relates to the Watchmen, right? The monster in Watchmen was crafted by artists and writers, right? Putting, their twisted creations, the things of their twisted and nightmarish dreams into, this brain of a psychic, right? That would release a psychic attack and drive everyone insane. Cthulhu himself, you think about just the real world, right? Was created by a writer, H.P. Lovecraft, who was a little insane. So you're sort of, see how this fits into the story of Cthulhu. Instead of the monster giving, he wants to create a monster whose nasty dreams will drive people insane. Well, instead, let's take, the artists and their nasty dreams, put them into this brain, and thus we will create Cthulhu by, the reverse process. If Cthulhu causes these nasty dreams, if we take nasty dreams and put them together, we'll get Cthulhu. So yeah, the image of this big monster at the end evokes Cthulhu, evokes this story, and if you know this story, you can see how well it fits right along with Watchmen, and if you know how much Alan Moore loves H.P. Lovecraft, which is no secret, this whole thing is painfully obvious. It is without a doubt intentional, right? And replacing that monster with anything else, that did not evoke Cthulhu, did not evoke Lovecraftian horror, would sort of not fit, right? You'd be losing this whole aspect of the story that was without a doubt intentional. If it was some other sort of alien invasion, let's say it was, green men, right? It would achieve the same effect for Ozymandias, perhaps, if executed properly, but it would not evoke this story of Cthulhu. It would not evoke the idea of people being driven insane. The whole part about, artists, working together on the island to create this. The whole part about the comedian discovering it and being driven insane. None of those things would make sense. None of those things would fit. If it was a nuke, the comedian wouldn't have been driven mad by it, right? Only it was biological attack, he wouldn't have been driven mad. Only by some sort of Lovecraftian horror do all those other pieces of the story fit together. Now, there's one other aspect of Lovecraftian horror that I would like to point out in The Watchmen, and that is Antarctica. There's a Lovecraftian story. I forget which one it is. I should have looked this up before I recorded this. Where there is horror in Antarctica, and basically the old ones, some alien race. They're not Cthulhu. They're just some aliens that are much more advanced. We're in Antarctica, sort of frozen in the ice, if you will, and people go there and discover it and find things that man was not meant to know. And if you know the end of Watchmen. Ozymandias's, Fort Karnak, is in Antarctica. That is no accident. I believe that, and I will argue that it was clearly a reference to that Lovecraftian story. And, when you piece that together with the Cthulhu tale and the monster and the psychic wave that drives everyone insane and the artists and writers that create it and the comedian being driven insane, I haven't seen the movie yet. Maybe it's a good movie, but I've heard that there is no big monster at the end of the movie. And from my point of view, based on these arguments and some others I can make from, other aspects such as science and politics and psychology, it has to be a squid or squid monster, Lovecraftian horror, for it to work as intended. And without that, I think you are losing a rather significant part of the story of Watchmen and a significant part of the impact of the ending. And so even before seeing the movie, I'm a little disappointed. So for anyone out there who is arguing that, it didn't have to be a squid, something else works just as well, such and such, I think you're wrong, and I will argue it with you, and I think I've made my point pretty clearly. And if you haven't read Call of Cthulhu and you have read Watchmen, or you need to read both. They're sort of, they go very, very nicely together. And that's just about all I have to say about that.